Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. I don't know if all of you were here for the fire alarm outside, but that was not a great way to start the day. But I guess we're lucky that it didn't actually happen while we were having the talks here. So, yeah, let's be thankful for that. So today we have a little bit of a shorter day. We're starting a little later. We are still going to have a few talks this morning, then a panel before lunch today. Yes, we're gonna shoot for the moon, try to have the panel before lunch. And then right after the panel, before we have our food, we're going to take a group photo, probably over there on the way to the food room. So if you don't want to be in the photo, that's fine. You just stay to the side. So we'll have a group photo on the stairs to commemorate everyone being here. And then a couple more talks in the afternoon, and that'll be the end of that. So thank you very much. And I'd like to introduce Yogesh, who is going to start us off today. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Richard. Thanks a lot, Yug. It's a pleasure standing here in front of all of us. Sorry. So, my sincere thanks to all the family, friends, and now I feel that I've made friends across the world. And so far, I always used to feel that I was alone, but no more. I have, thanks a lot. I have lots of people who share my passion, share the same kind of work. They get excited looking at a small map on the card, and also a map which does not work good on an app. So we all share that same passion. So let's go ahead. I think I'd given my title to the talk as When Billions Move. And I don't know how many of you have been to India. How many of you have been to India? Yeah, lots of them. So you have tasted how the country is and how busy we are and how populated we are. And you must have also noticed that maybe the projects don't happen in the same way that they happen in the Western country, right? It's a little different way in which we work. So if we are saying that we want to move ahead in India, it doesn't work like we just move ahead. Like, you join me and then let's move ahead. It doesn't happen like that. It actually happens that we have to move ahead together. Because we are such a diverse country, there is on one side you have metropolises like Mumbai, Delhi, which are like extremely modern. You get the latest infrastructure and everything. At the same time, you have villages which actually need the transport. You need facilities over there. So that's why then, if you have to take so many people along, the pace at which you move is a little less. So what I'll show you, my talk will have first few slides about giving you a glimpse of what's happening in India, particularly in transport and mobility, which is not only limited to probably mapping or urban transport. And then I'll talk a few things about the works that I have done and a little bit of thought-provoking stance as designers that we need to take when we have to talk to the transport authorities. This is a regular station, a railway station, somewhere in Rajasthan, and people are standing on the station. You don't see a roof. There are a few signs there. There's a water fountain. This is a normal railway station. Railway stations are also changing in India now, but the train behind it is actually a train which is Palace on Wheels. So none of the people who are actually on the train station right now probably will even ever enter into the train. It's a 5 to 6 star luxury tourist train which runs in the state. So that's the kind of diversity that we are talking about, and we have to ensure that when you design for a public transport in a city, everybody has to be included, and it has to be inclusive. There is a lot of symbolism. There is a lot of deep philosophy that we work with. We do a lot of rituals. There are a lot of mailings, and you have seen that a lot of work that we have done over ages, the scriptures that we have, we never documented them. They were all passed by word of mouth. So we believe in word of mouth more. If I talk to you and I give you my word, then yes, it's considered, yes, he will do something about that. And that makes a lot of difference, particularly for information design, because it doesn't get documented anywhere, so you don't find maps in India. Very rarely you'll find maps in public places. Yeah? Same way, we worship a lot of systems that would put together. When you buy a vehicle, you will worship it. Every year we worship our vehicles, we worship our machineries, we worship our tools, because they are actually bringing value to what you're doing. Mumbai, everybody knows, it's an impossible system if I explain that 14 to 16 people travel in a square meter in the rush hour, which is at least 4 hours every day, 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening. If you want to have an experience of how a compactor works, you should travel in this train, right? This is one of the pictures that I took when I was on a rail trip. I do backpack rail trips in India. So it's a regular station, a regular concourse. This concourse is in Ahmedabad. Everything happens here. You buy tickets, you wait, you eat. You are probably trying to look for the next travel. And then suddenly 10 years back, we built a huge airport in Mumbai. And that changed the aspirations of people. That transport infrastructure can be different. And we have that ability to make an impact. So I'll keep giving you these diverse images. And on the other end, somewhere in Rajasthan, people are saying we don't get buses. We don't have modes of transport. Let's build it ourselves. And these are still built. Now they've got electric, but they still built it themselves, right? So it's a design instinct that people will have to solve their problems. Delhi Metro, which was probably the first project which started organized urban transit system in India. I had a fortunate chance of working on it. And you can imagine 46 million people living in the area where this Delhi Metro operates, right? And once you do the sign, sometimes I always wonder, this sign was on my drawing sometime nicely, page, nice elevation. We worried a lot about the fonts and stuff like that. The signs are like this now. They're a part of the environment, right? This is the very busy market in the north part of Delhi, and the station is underground. It's under the tubes, right? About 20 years back, Indian Railways decided to start ticket vending machines. And ticket vending machines were introduced because they had a lot of challenges because the ticket queues were growing in front of the counters. So they introduced vending machines, but they suddenly noticed that those vending machines also had long queues. So there was a huge problem in people accessing the information. There were user interface issues, and the ticket vending machines had longer queues. So it was difficult for them to even manage that. So finally, they brought out that guy who was sitting behind the window, outside the window. So you can see a guy sitting there. He actually does the work for you. So it's not a vending machine, self-operated vending machine. He does it for you. Huge challenges in terms of because everybody uses the system, and you cannot expect everybody to have the similar kind of a learning curve to use an interface, yeah? And now, India has just leapfrogged. Now I have started this statement that we have now today believe more in code than God, right? So you must have heard about this unified payment interface that India has started. I have a studio which has about 7-8 people. We are growing slowly. All are young. They don't carry any currency in their wallet. They just have to scan a QR code, pay for buying a banana, to pay for buying a ticket, to pay for buying a movie. No more cash. And even this person who is a sadhu, probably in a temple, priest, he is also buying some scriptures using that code. So it's gone to that level, and even tickets on trains are purchased like that. I'm passionate about trains, so I do a lot of work in that. So there is a lot of work happening in railways. New trains are being built. We are becoming self-reliant. We are now catching up in terms of building our own railways. This is the train which was launched about 3 years ago. And they are now rolling out more stuff like that. And we will be soon having a high speed. So probably 7, 8, or 10 years down the line, you will have high-speed connectivities across major metropolitan cities in India. Currently, it is happening on the west coast, west side, which is from Mumbai to Ahmedabad, if you're aware of the geography. Yeah, we are partly involved in this project for wayfinding works right now. Again, a contrast. There are still ports which are building ships, wooden ships, and they take about 12, 14 months to build. They still use the age-old ancient methodologies of tying the wood and put them together. And I had a fortunate time to visit one of them. And they still do transport trade between India and Middle East. These ships still operate, right? BRT has been popular. BRT is slowly growing. It has hiccups because a lot of push from the government is on the metros because they are seen as drivers for economy. They're seen as we are building good infrastructure, bringing more, I would say, jobs to cities. Buses are slightly not a favorite. So we are a part of small group of people who are doing a little bit activism to say, improve the buses. Yeah, it's high time you need to improve the buses. A lot of work is happening on urban scale where, see, our cities are not like Abu Dhabi, where you actually had a clean canvas, right? We started working with cities which are 300, 400 year olds, at times 1,000 year olds. And how do you work on the city center and make them accessible, right? So plazas are being carved out. And then there are last mile connectivity solutions that are being built, which are electric two-wheelers. This is a friend of mine who started this startup, which is in Bangalore. So there you can put a coin or hire this and go for the last mile connectivity. So there's a lot of things happening in India. So we are expanding airports. So this is just a kind of an oversight of what's happening in India in mobility. We are building airports, we are connecting regions. We talked about that NCRTC. It's the first pilot. Probably that pilot is going to expand across all the metropolises in India. We are reclaiming streets for pedestrian. It's a mass movement. Each and every city is doing initiatives under the Smart Cities mission. We are promoting cycling and non-motorized transport. And yes, we are going electric. And it's been very hardly driven from top down, that we have to meet our global benchmarks of emission and everything. So there is a lot happening. But we should not always, so when in India, it has to be inclusive, it has to be diverse, and you have to embrace that range. This guy was my fellow passenger, sells newspapers on a bus stand. Every day he comes to the bus, he's an handicap. He goes on a small caddy. And the bus driver knows that this guy comes at a stand. He waits for him to come. We pick him up. He sits in this place, and he gets down at some larger bus stand where he sells newspapers. Now, that's the inclusivity that we are talking about, and it happens across all the cities. So if you work on mobility and transport, you have to embrace this, right? And for information designers, it's like an exciting place, right? So languages, we have some 16 languages which use some 7 or 8 different scripts. I have myself worked in, I think, 7 different scripts which use 10 languages, right? So multilinguality, it's very difficult for of course, a lot of you can only read the English that's below, but the middle one is Hindi, and the upper one is Tamil. If somebody is from Singapore, they could probably recognize the script. Yeah? Beautiful bus stop. This was demolished under a road widening exercise. If I was there, I would have probably picked this and put it into a museum. You know, amount of care that guys must have taken to build this bus stop with this information, bus numbers in concrete and stuff like that, right? Multilinguality to the core. Even the license plate has 2 languages, right? So that's the way you have to work. Simple board. Your train comes on this station, and people use it. So it's like, you'll notice when I go down in my slide, how design should approach into working at this scale. You can't deliver the solution ultimately to that last person that this is ready solution. You might have to create toolkits. You might have to create systems which people use themselves and then create for themselves, because it is very difficult for one company or one person to reach out to all of them. So the approach of design will be very different over here. So, and as somebody said yesterday, a lot of information is given by bus drivers and conductors. I think you were mentioning about that. It's the same at our place, right? I just did a survey in my main city. About 79% people feel, yeah, I'll just ask the bus driver and the conductor. Now, that's how the systems are. The dependencies on ready-made maps, printed schedules is very less, right? So after that initial work of what has been happening in India, I'll start about introduction of my work. I'm a railways fan, so I just went to Europe once, and then I just took a trip into high speed because I just wanted to go there. And so this was a project that I did of redesigning the coach of the suburban train in Mumbai. That train had not changed for more than 60 years. And it has a huge problem of ingress and egress, and we kind of did the layout again. And the other part of me is today, which is a very happy person, very joyous, and I'm really thanking Yog and Richard for this, to give me an opportunity to speak in front of people who have actually been doing the systems from which I have learned. So I got a chance to travel to Shanghai very often, so I went there, understood. I have traveled in Shanghai buses without understanding anything in Chinese, just to understand how the systems work, and it is brilliant, right? Then I've lived in Hong Kong for a good amount of time. I've learned from MTR a lot. I've learned from Paris a lot. So all those people who have actually been behind those are sitting in front, and I'm really happy that I'm really joyous to have this presence in front of me. So in 2001, somebody approached saying, okay, can you do some work for a metro project? It was actually not even a metro project. They said, it's a railway station. Can you do some work? And I was a railway fan, graduated in 98. 2001, this came on my door. I said, great, I will do it. It's not a design of a train. I said, no problem, I'll do that. And that became the Delhi Metro. And this was the first project where absolutely zero experience of how do you manage a system map, how do you design wayfinding, how do you understand the system, how is it connected, what is the future expansion of system, no idea, we jumped into it. I still remember it was a big bid document, we had to submit that bid document. The day we were reading that entire bid document and making our notes was the day when 9/11 happened. I still remember that day very, very clearly. And that was probably, that changed the course of my work, that I started focusing on the transport, on information design, and the entire system design across. So I have done a lot of work in retail and exhibitions for a good amount of time, and that was for Philips. So I was working with Philips Design, their global design team, and I was based in India, and did a lot of retail and exhibitions. But one day, one of my friend who was working in Tata Elxsi, there's one person from Tata Elxsi, has he come today? I was super happy when he said, he was telling me, I wanted to meet you because we are doing the work that you have started. So Tata Elxsi never had any work in transport. And I said, no, I want to work in transport mobility. If you give me a chance, we'll build it. So over 11 years, I worked at Elxsi, and I've created a whole domain, which now is, it's a very strongly built ship which is sailing on its own. So I'm really very happy. When he said, we are here to talk about transport and things like that, I remember I used to be the only participant going to my boss saying, I want to attend this conference, I want to go to this lecture, we want to do these projects, and it's come a long way now. So it's almost about 15 years since I started in 2008. We couldn't do retail because I wanted to move away from retail, and here it was. So it's been set as a course now. So why mobility and why in India? This was a very beautiful illustration that we got, which shows the density of population in India, which I think everybody knows. There is no great guesses to understand why this data, right? And very beautiful illustration. But what actually makes that major impact is this illustration. You can see the density. Our area is smaller than China, and we are more populated than China, right? And we can't take the same paradigms with which Western world has developed. It cannot. We will have to change the way things are working in India here. Imagine all these people who are going to travel. Mobility is the core part of what you do. You can't change that. How do you do this? So I really I have just picked up this visualization from Alistair Ray. You can kind of Google for his data as well. And this is the challenge. It's a very quick challenge that I've put it. What is the challenge that we actually want to solve? Somebody's making a map, somebody's making good architecture in stations, somebody is making sure that there is a design team as a part of the operator, which is ensuring that the whole system is delivering a good experience. What are we trying to solve? Imagine when a person in India wants to travel, he says, I want to go from A to B, he takes out his two-wheeler, he takes out his car, his aspiration is to buy a car, change cars, and it will happen. That's what is happening. But this is what we want to actually make it happen more, which is happening in Western countries, but it may not happen the same way in India. So the scenario 2 is extremely challenging. It's already looking complicated in the visual over here, right? So if you want to really make an impact, the scenario 2 has to be addressed, and not just addressed by one thing that I will make a map, or will run a metro, or will run only a train service, or make the bus air conditioned. It actually has to work across the entire system, or else you'll get into this, right? A lot of cities are like this now, and this is Delhi, just outskirts of Delhi when you start going towards Gurgaon. I was actually looking at this image and counting buses. I could only locate 7 of them, right? That's probably not the way in which India will move ahead. Yeah, and we can't just keep sitting and praying. Yeah, you have to do something. Let's pray something will happen. Nothing is going to happen. So let's do something. So I decided to focus my work as a circ design studio to focus mainly on mobility experience, service design. Our approach is always using service design towards transport. So you should be in a position to look at how a person travels, why he travels, who is traveling, where he starts from, where he ends, what are the various touch points, and then design the whole system around his requirements. And a lot of work, my work is in public interest design, which is for the larger good, and we also do narrative experiences, some small, other small projects. I'm really indebted to Tony Howard. Andrew knows him. I think some other people might also know him. I call him as my guru. I met him in 2003. And since that time, he is no more. We lost him last year. But he has been the person who guided we shared the same background. He was an industrial designer working in wayfinding. He was working in Transport for London. And he has probably inspired me a lot. Yeah. So design that touches millions every day is something that is the core purpose with which we are driven. Wherever you can make a larger impact, we would like to be present in that area. And talking of maps, so all of you would be wondering, when are we talking of maps? So these are various maps that we have been doing. So this was Delhi. When we had done, it was a small network. Actually, I also have the first sketches of this map with me on tracings, which I might probably tomorrow put together in a museum somewhere, which Delhi has curated. So this is Delhi. Very first lines were only the red ones, yellow and the blue that started, which now has gone across. Then this is the next map that I did, which was for Bangalore. So you can see that it used it as a grid. Have you seen Indians drawing a rangoli outside their homes, which is like a pattern which they draw with rice powder? So that was the inspiration to become the main identity of the system. So we used that texture to create a map. Here you can see that there was no metro in the city. So we used the road network as a background and created a map on top of it, so people could have a reference. So most of Indian cities where we have introduced these maps, they always use the existing image, which was based on road. So you had a ring road, you had arterial roads which go from the city center away. So we use that image, and as yesterday somebody said, that we have to concentrate on building that image. And through all these things, we actually build a good image of the city. This was Chennai. Chennai again has an extremely good active MRTS network, which is managed by railways. And this was the first metro which got connected to airport in India. So far, none of the metros were connecting to airports. This was the first one. We did the map over there. Then next one was a small feeder line, which is Mumbai monorail, which again was only a feeder line which connected to the 3 lines. These are the 3 suburban lines of Mumbai, and they connect to them. That's the next map that we did. Further, this was Kochi. Kochi was a very excellent example where we have been able to look at and propose to the client, say, don't think of things in the small parts, like, okay, we'll do architecture, we will do furniture design, we'll do branding separately. Let's look at the whole thing together and tie up everything as a customer experience. Apparently, Kochi probably is I think it's the only city which now has a water metro. They call it a water metro because if you see these lines here, they were proposed at that time. This is a map at least 5 years old. They are going from point to point, and they have seamless interchanges with the metro line and even the buses. So this is the one in Kochi. This is the one in Nagpur, exact center of India. Again, uses the the road map as the base to give you an idea about how the expanse is. I got a chance to design a BRTS map for Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. And that was also exciting. Just a simple BRT system which has just a straight line and branches at 2 locations, and it has its own feeder system. So the feeder system is also connected to, we use some local icons, and so some of the icons have been developed. I'm not going to detail into those icons. If anybody has any interest, I'll definitely share that, how it has been done. It's been implemented across the entire Dar es Salaam BRTS system. This is the Mumbai map that is put up at the panel over there. This was recently done, and this will change the face of Mumbai. Basically, because Mumbai always was considered as a linear city, so there was one line which goes on the western side, which is the coast. There was a line which goes from here and enters into the mainland, and all these lines were built during the colonial era by the British, and they were trade routes. They were built to get the entire raw material like cotton and various foodstuff from the mainland towards the port, which was in Mumbai, and from here they used to ship everything to Europe. So those 2-3 lines were used. There is also a line which is Harbour Line, which just connects the docks. It's very similar to the Docklands DLR in the UK. So those were the 3 lines which took the load, and now these lines will completely change the face of Mumbai. And Mumbai is one city which has the maximum share of urban transport in India, and probably even the world. Together, buses and the trains carry almost close to 68% of trips. So if there are 100 trips happening in Mumbai, 68 to 70 trips happen using urban transport. So it's no guess that if you start a metro, it's going to be full, because people are accustomed, and people walk. In Mumbai, very easily people walk 2 kilometers from the stations. And all these stations, the way when you was mentioning about those suburbs around the Circle Line in Tokyo, all these areas have got developed as markets. And it's a whole different world that has got formed along the entire line. So I have been doing a lot of wayfinding across airports, factories. This is the monorail. We've done hotels, considerable amount of wayfinding work that has been happening. And this again also started because airports wanted to change the whole signage. The airport authority, which is the central government authority, and we helped them to prepare a standardized guideline, which is now published. I was leading this project when it was happening, and it has standardized everything. The project that really changed the way things were working is we approached the head of the metro in Kochi and told them that it's not just about wayfinding, let's do everything. And they said, nobody has done this before. I was connected to a few people from the Dutch railways. I knew RATP has a design team. I knew MTR has a design team. I was connected to some people from Australia who had a design. They had a customer experience department. And that was interesting. So with all those readings, I said, no, let's take that one step ahead, and let's look at everything that touches the customer. So this is like a dream project for any industrial designer to do. So what you get to design is you get to work on the trains, which is like I cancelled one of my road trip because I was sitting with the Alstom team to design the coach and the interiors. Of course, you have limited things that you can do, but yes, it's exciting. You design the tickets, the graphics, the brand of the tickets, right? And you create the whole brand. So now when we created this actually set the entire expectation that we are going to have all this. This has already been launched, which is now called Water Metro. Soon the buses have now started configuring themselves and rebranding. Taxis and last mile connectivity has already come on the single fare, and you can use the same card to go on a auto as well, and the last mile connectivity. Then we created the app, the whole app that helps you to navigate. We designed the machines. So in India, a lot of these projects get through government bidding process. And government bidding process is extremely limited to define the actual design intent, because you can't keep it in black and white. And then it is left to the imagination and the capability of the senior-most person there to understand what he gets from the vendors, right? And it was very limiting. So the kind of designs that I had got, one day they came across my table saying, we are getting these kind of designs. I said, no, this is not going to go ahead. Give us time, we'll give you those designs. And we redesigned the whole system, understanding the internal equipment, how it can be packaged well, and we designed. So this is an add value machine, and it's a smaller machine, it's that size. We even reduced the cost of the production, which they were doing, getting from the earlier make. Because as an industrial designer, you get involved into these things. We also designed furniture for them. We designed art at all the stations. Of course, we gave them a guideline. The artists came on board and created. And Kochi is a city which is like a tourist capital. If anybody have been to Kerala in India, that's the main city. There's a more city in Kerala. So Then came Mumbai. So by that time, I had stepped out of the company in 2019, and I started on my own. I said, okay, I've built a big ship that's sailing. Let me start my own ship, and I'm here for the last 4 years building my small team, and we got the Mumbai Metro. Here we worked with few designers from the Sistra stream. Maybe you may have known them. They were from the Sistra stream, and we collaborated together to create a very different science system which tells stories through pictures. So generally, when you talk about a wayfinding sign, you say, okay, there's an arrow, then there's an icon, then there's a text, and that's the standard format globe everybody is using. And we said that we are looking at Mumbai, which is like the largest metropolis in India, and people across all the India come here. Very big language issue. So how do we make it more pictorial? So the story goes like this. So we have designed the whole guideline document. The sign is also very different. This was a sign that we prototyped in fiberglass, though it was not approved because of some fire reasons. We didn't get that much time to prototype and stuff, but this was a sample that we had made. So the story is very simple. The signs go like this. You are entering entry A, you go down to an escalator, you will hit a gate, then you go down to the escalator, and you will go to a tube. And the same thing reverse works for an elevator line. And this is how, and the whole theme of this entire design system is calling follow the line. Because Mumbai is going to completely change because you are going to follow a red line or a yellow line or a blue line. So if that is going to be happening, then let us use that matrix and that theme. And that's how this entire thing. So if you look at this, this is working for the only underground line in Mumbai, which is line 3. This is for the elevated line. You are here, you go up, you take an elevator, and this entire sign system has been designed like Lego blocks. You just have to assemble the Lego blocks together, and you assemble the whole sign. And we got an award for this as well. So, and currently we are reviewing this entire sign system that's being implemented. There are huge challenges implementing this entire system because the clients don't understand the necessity of getting designers on board. They give it to the makers, and the makers don't understand the system. All those challenges are there, right? I have been an avid user of urban transport everywhere, so I have started publishing a lot of stuff. So one of my articles got published in the Springer Journal, which talks about if you use buses, what are the advantages on your health? And of course, there were not matrices about, I did not do any empirical calculations, but it was interesting that I just wrote the article saying the value of 135 minutes every 127 days. So 135 minutes was the time that I used to spend in the bus to commute in the morning and the evening, and I tracked it for 127 days. And what all I did in those times? I read books, I attended calls, I was sketching, I was doing a lot of stuff. I was connected to my city, and those advantages you cannot measure. And that's what got interested, and then they published this article in the paper. So when I had stepped out of the company, I'm towards the end of my talk now. When I stepped out of the company, I literally sent this sketch to our local bus operator, saying, I don't have anything to do. I'm trying to set up my studio, but I've been seeing that your bus system is not going right. You don't have proper information, passenger information. You need to do something, and there's a lot of things that we can improve. Give me a corner table and chair. I'll set up your design studio. They said, oh, I don't have money to pay. I said, I don't need money. I'll just come here, sit, tell me what you need to solve. And they said, great. So they told me, go to this particular bus stand and do something. So their idea was do some painting, add some graphics, do some art. And then we started intervening. So can you imagine these were the bus boards? You can't read, but imagine the inconsistency with which it was happening. And this will come to you as a surprise because for you this is given as a part of the Western systems, but it is not given in India. And you really have to struggle to convince them because they are saying this is a very challenging task for them. So this was the front of the board. We don't know where the bus is going. So they had challenges. So he says, don't worry, your guys are painting things with hand. We are not telling them to do some advanced printing or change the material. You just ensure that you discipline that implementation. That guy who paints only has one hand. He only paints with his right hand. He is only guy. I think he lost his hand even in one of the accidents. He is an employee, and he had a good painting, and then he started painting. And he paints these boards. That's it. You just have to give them very minimal intervention and they get it done. And that's how it has been really happening well. And then for that particular bus stand, we studied how many passengers really read, whether they know all the information. We present some sketches. So this is all happening out of my own interest that we'll make an improvement. So no major drawings done and no major surveys done, but we looked at how the buses are flying. Now we have a very deep understanding of how bus networks work. And my entire agenda with the bus corporations in India now is to change the image of buses from saying that, okay, a bus is from point A to point B. Don't look at that. Look at bus as a network. And as you had said yesterday, interchanges are important. There are interchanges in bus networks, and they are extremely strong. So we have kind of found out what are the formulas with which you can identify an interchange, how people make certain areas an interchange, which the bus corporation does not intend to, but that's how it has been identified. And we put up some maps. These were tested. So this happened pre-pandemic to 2019. We tested few colors, and it received very interesting feedback. And we also tested that this does not give you the entire schedule. So we put up QR codes. You scan the QR code, you will get the entire list of the whole route of the bus from A to B, and you can get the schedule as well. So we started doing this intervention, and slowly that entire activity started picking up. We started working closely with the operator. One of the few senior people were very interested, saying, okay, let's do something about it. And we have trained them to draw maps. Because for the bus operators, the guys who manage the fleet, the routes are at the back of their mind. I don't have to spend time. So I just sit with them saying, okay, let's look at this bus, let's segregate these routes, and you draw it for me. And they draw it in a very crude manner, and then we convert those maps into better looking maps, which are, so this is the new format which I have applied for design registration as well. So this is probably extending the bus system, so each bus stop can have this map. It tells you where all the buses go, where all the interchanges are. So if you want to go to this particular stop, there are these all options that you get. It's a little extension from, if you've seen the spider maps of the London buses, a little takeoff from that, but a different system that we have evolved. And this is the photograph that you see of my profile. So this is a recent map, again, put up at my own cost at a bus stop. And I was really worried when I put this map up, because a lot of these bus stops get damaged because people paste handbills, you know. You can come to my shop, flat for rent, come for jobs. Luckily, for last 6 months, nobody had pasted anything on this. Right? So, which means people are realizing that this information is important. Without, there's a small note at the bottom saying, please don't damage it, but that's it. But people are realizing that it's happening. So now we are trying to expand this across other things. So this kind of work has got noticed by the Central Institute. There's one institute in India which does capacity development for all the bus transports in India. So they are, so all the bus transports come under government and the state governments. And the state governments have combined this institute which trains their drivers, which train the conductors, which train the operators, which train the marketing team. So I've started doing trainings for them of how you need to improve the bus system. I'm in a process of setting up a guideline document of, because I think there are some 70 cities which are going to start fresh new bus systems. So if we are able to instill that guideline saying, okay, when you start a new bus system, what you should do? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this has to be done. Then I think new bus systems will change. The old bus systems are difficult to change because you can't move an institution, but you can make an impact in an institution which is getting formed. So that's how it is basically working. So I have considerable amount of work done across India. So far I've not done work globally, which I would be happy to do, collaborate with all of you guys to look at how it can be done. So my always approach is to integrate all the mobility, because the passenger doesn't always just look at one mode, he looks at everything else. And we are intervening from physical to digital. So finally coming to that particular end where the pleasure of traveling and how to deliver the better customer experience, I always advise that all these people who are building mobile metro networks or transport networks, they should shift focus. They look at it as an infrastructure project. They should look at it as a service project. It is tomorrow going to deliver a certain value through a service, and that should come in. So if you do that, your operations teams will come on the first day and sit next to the design team. yeah, which we have seen the operations team come at last always. Then we are also looking at experience design, which is not an activity like an architect does. Architects will come, design the building and go. But experience design is a continuous activity. You have to keep doing that work continuously. Then operations need more customer focus than the construction phase. As I said, operations need to come in early, and they should build design departments inside. Now, I know there are people sitting here who manage an active design department in a transport network. I would be happy to learn from you, collaborate with you to see how we can build some systems in India for that. And it's high time, we need that. And particularly, that's my advice always, set up a dedicated design team. It doesn't come as a surprise to a lot of you, but in India, it is a big surprise. This is, what does it do? We don't know. We have just designed a station, that's it. We don't need a design team, but I have been trying to convince it. And another part that we are constantly working on is, if you really want to integrate, these are the 4 pillars with which you need to work. One is you need to have a physical integration. I should be able to come from a bus stand, walk under a shade without crossing a road signal or a light, and then get into a metro station. Can you build that? Second, I should integrate fare. Can I use the same card, same techniques to pay for a metro, to a bus, to an auto, to any last mile connectivity? Third, information. It has to be integrated. I've learned a lot from Hong Kong and Singapore, which integrates a lot of last mile and interconnectivity. And of course, we'll try to implement it here. And the fourth one, which is the toughest to do, is institution. They are tough to integrate. That's the biggest challenge that we are facing, and hope so will happen. So this is one of my hypotheses, that as design, what we actually need to do is, you've all seen this Maslow's hierarchy of pyramids, which looks at basic things. We had food, shelter, and clothing, right? It has probably changed to this now, right? Internet, can anybody of you sit for even 10 minutes without internet? No. Mobility? No. Healthcare? No, right? These have come at the base of yours. Probably this pyramid needs to change. And when you look at this, design intervention can work at the level of vision, which we are trying to work at many locations. It should work at the level of policy. It should work at the level of creating ecosystems. When I say ecosystem, if you are advising that, okay, all the transport networks need to sit together and plan that we have one person to serve. He might be using this different networks, but we have to look at that. Then you have to create an ecosystem. And then you create products. A product in which I can tap on a card, a product with which I can pay, a signage, a furniture, or a station. That's all at the product level. And in India, it doesn't work that way. Because it's so diverse. You may want to start a vision. We want to reduce pollution, right? That's at the top level. We want to say we want to reduce road accidents. These are visionary statements that people start with. They say we want to create walkable cities, or we want to say reduce congestion. And this is probably the vision that they want to set. But by the time you realize it, because a lot of things happen, deliberations happen, meetings happen, policies are made and stuff like that, by the time it reaches the bottom, people are not going to sit alight. As I said, they will start building their own systems, right? You saw this image previously, right? There was a gap in mobility. They said, no, I will build my own auto rickshaw and then start running, right? Electric came to India not by government. Electric came to India by people who started importing kits from China, assembling two-wheeler parts together, and suddenly one fine day, government woke up saying, what is this on the road? I don't have a policy for it. What if this guy hits somebody, right? He is charging from my grid. What is the policy? And then suddenly they woke up, oh, we need to put an electric policy in place. This probably happened 10 years back. And now they have an electric policy, and then there's a huge push that is happening. So what happens is, when you actually, as designers, I always say that we should focus at all these levels, and we should know where we are working. You're working at level 1 if you're able to influence a vision. You're working at level 2 if your create a policy for things, right? Then you are working at L3 if you're influencing ecosystems, if you're creating the setup of how everything will come together, right? You are working at L4 level where you're building platforms. Now, this is an additional layer. So, for example, if you must have seen this entire open source network, right? Open source platform. There are a lot of softwares that are built. So that's actually at the L4. they have built open source tools which people can use to create their own stuff. So design can work at that level. And at the end, you're working at file those tools and create products. That's what, if you want to reach to each and every person, you can't reach. So you have to create tools so that they can build things on their own. They will co-create. And that's possibly what, if you want to serve a large population in a short time, you can't say that I'll reach the last person. You will have to say that I'll do in such a way that the people are in a position to use those tools and create things for themselves. A lot of design is now happening like this in the country. And it's a cycle. It keeps going round in cycle. So that's the end of my talk. Just 4 slides. In addition to all the mobility work that I've been doing, we also do some art, sculpture along with wayfinding. This is art that we did in Goa. Then we've done wayfinding for a large stadium recently inaugurated for the World Cup of Hockey. Then for the Indian Space Research Organization, we created merchandise because we wanted to promote it extremely well, because that was not known, and now it is all in the news after we successfully landed on moon. And this was a t-shirt that we created saying, yeah, what we do is rocket science, yeah, and signed by Indian Space Research Organization. As a part of this, we also designed a board game. It took a good 6 months to design it, and it has a strategy of teaching to kids, and probably it's not a kids game, but a family can play together, of how do you do interplanetary travel. And it's played on 2 boards. This is the Earth and this is the Mars. The Earth board is very much like you have played snakes and ladders, very much similar on your luck. You play with the dice. And on Mars, you are playing with a strategy because you have to occupy and make a colony. And that's how the whole system goes. I've had fun doing this. I've set up a railways design center now, trying to intervene into rolling stock design, any amount of experience design that can happen into stations and systems, even catering system for that matter, some visuals of what we are doing as a part of our work. And that's the journey so far. More to come as we go. This was a sketch that I did a long time back, about 5-6 years back. This is a train which has 2 locomotives at either end of it. And you have to decide which one to take. This goes inside towards your inner self, and the other goes towards the sun with which you can illuminate the whole world. So where do you want to go? It's a little bit of a philosophical statement. So maybe that I did a long time when I was on a rail trip, and that's how things have been. And thanks for listening to me. The upper one is my website and the LinkedIn connect. It would be great to talk to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Yogesh. We have time for one question. Someone has? Yes?
Thank you very much for your excellent presentation. I'm Guido Bruggeman and working currently in Bangalore.
Okay.
A little bit cynical because, or ironic, home of many map makers and travel planners. The best IT persons in the world come from Bangalore, and they travel every morning 3 hours by public transport and 3 hours in the evening. It's a little bit funny. One of the reasons to work there is the big failure of the metro systems in India. In average, the ridership is 50% lower than the forecast, and actually most of the metro systems you agree, likely, with
Absolutely.
Are a failure.
Absolutely.
And the failure is because there is no integration, there is no accessibility, there's nothing. Bus companies refuse to talk to the metro company, and the metro companies refuse to talk to the bus companies. You rarely find a map in India. We all know that 75% of the world population in urban areas doesn't have access to maps. And the larger part is coming from India. So you come to a city, wherever you come in India, do you have a bus map? It doesn't exist, so don't be surprised. What can we do? That's the question. That's the challenge for me, to set up the feeder bus network, the timetables, information for Bangalore. But what do you see as the essential part, because I think the essential part is coming probably from information, and information and integration go hand in hand. But what's your vision about what is the key aspect, what is lacking in India, in particular also to this metro system and integration?
I think it's, it's great. You kind of summarized the problem precisely, that is absolutely lack of integration between various transports. Long time back, I was working with the Delhi, and there was this officer who was from the government who works now at United Nations. He gave me an extremely good analogy. He said, imagine there is a chain which is suspended from top, and you want to make things happen, right? Don't make things happen at the lower links. You move the lower link, nothing happens to the chain. You should move the upper link. So if you move and are able to influence at the top level, that we need to integrate. We need to integrate, shift the focus from using urban transport as a tool to say that we want to get economy on the, we want to create jobs, we want to fuse money into the projects, yeah? Because it's easy loans, right? If you want to build a metro, it's easy loans from a government, global banks. But that's not the reason why you should build infrastructure. The infrastructure should be built to look at human capital and that human time that we waste in transport and the stress that people go through. And if somebody is able to value that, do the valuation and present to the top of the chain, saying that you may have taken 1,000 crores as Indian rupees loan for building a metro. If you take the similar loan to look at the whole system, a bus system can be done in 1/10 the value of it. You will probably increase the human efficiency in your cities by 15 times. Now, some empirical calculation needs to be done to show that this is what we do, right? And I think we should all put together the efforts to make that thing heard. That's the only thing that I feel can be done.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
Next up, we have Mariam Nada, yes, from Transport for Cairo.
Okay. Hello, everyone. First of all, I really appreciate that you invited us and me and TFC to present our work, Yug and Richard, and here we go. So, who are we? We are a strategic advisory practice that work within the domain of sustainable urban mobility. We have an amazing data lab team that it works on the data management platform where we map all the transportation networks. We do a lot of analysis, modeling, simulation, and many other stuff. And we do that with the help of a route lab, which is an inbuilt or an in-house built application that we created from scratch to facilitate the process of data collection that is not really, or in our country or in the global north, global south, and in the African context, we're data poor. We live in data poor environments, and we need to kind of figure out ways to collect this kind of data. So we have Route Lab, which is our application, and our amazing tech team worked on it. And then we have the Urban Mobility Lab, which basically produce research, policy papers. And then, of course, we have maps. And this is basically what I do. We design transit maps, we design quality passenger information systems, and I'm going to introduce this more. So just to give a background on Transport for Cairo, as Yogesh was just telling us, transport is all circulated through word of mouth. We really have nothing that maps the whole system in Cairo. So this was an initiative, basically. We started as an initiative. We wanted to map the whole greater Cairo network. And we started in 2015. Then we did our first workshop in 2016 where we co-organized a workshop with 12 students to design just 20 metro lines, just to get an idea on passenger information and design and so on. So we created a series of maps. This is just one of them, and those are the 20 bus lines that exist in Cairo. And what is amazing about this map is this only is a representation of only 2% of the network. So you can imagine how really hard it is to put everything on a map. As for us, the quality is not very good. But anyways, as for us, we worked with projects within Cairo and also beyond Cairo. So for the projects that are within Cairo, we worked with private operators, for example, bus operators and also RTP Dev, to design passenger information systems for the metro and the light rail systems. And also we worked beyond Cairo as several initiatives and also part of mapping projects in African contexts and cities where we wanted to design transit maps for cities such as Kampala, Lusaka, and also we did an initiative where we wanted to design a sustainable travel guide for COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. So just to give you an idea, how is the mass transit landscape really shaping up in Cairo? Because of the economic reforms that are happening recently and this need for attracting foreign investment, we kind of had this boom to initiate a lot of mass transit projects. So as you can see here, we only have the Metro Line 1 and 2, which were already existing and operating, and also we have the Metro Line 3 that is operated by RTP Dev and also is extending. It's still growing. So those are the operational lines, as well as the capital, the capital train. So just to give an understanding, this is the city center, this is Cairo, this is the Nile, and beyond the city is the suburbs. We call them new urban communities that are, as you see, they're very huge and they're low dense. And we're kind of building this whole system, which is composed of a high-speed rail, Metro Line 4, 5, 6, and the monorail east and west, the BRT system that circulates around the ring road. And this is all just to kind of connect the whole city towards the new administrative capital, which maybe a lot of you have heard about. Yesterday, Yo was telling us about how Japan was teaching students on how to read maps. And in our case, we don't have that in Cairo. Not because the education system is bad or anything, but because basically we just never had a transit map before in the whole city. And when we were asked about, or we were challenged to actually create a map by RTP Dev for the network that was going to kind of be experienced by thousands of people, that was a really, really, really huge challenge. And we had to do something. We had to really think it through. So as I was saying, for this initiative, the third metro line, they wanted to rebrand the metro and turning it into, or doing this rebranding, whole rebranding strategy and turning it into the Green Line 3 through passenger information, through also a lot of design elements and so on and so forth. So this is what we were assigned to do. We wanted to create a whole passenger information system showing a network map, directional signage, a fares map, which shows in every station the fares that are being there, a smart car zone map, local maps, and also line maps. However, when we started understanding, or when we started seeing how to design an underground metro map, we started understanding that, okay, in order to design a map, we had to follow the schematic design of the network, first of all, and we had to kind of dissociate this network from the whole geography of the city. However, when we started working on this map, it was kind of challenging because we kind of were a bit afraid that people that never saw a transit map before, especially that all they had is this map, which was an open street base map with some lines that are just put over there. And we kind of had to reshape and redesign this whole map in order to fit their needs. So at that point, we decided to go for a more hybrid approach. Of course, the colors are not showing, but I think you can see it better on the map behind. So basically, the map is a schematic map that is overlaid on a hybrid design, showing all the main districts in the city, and also the districts are demarcated by the main street networks that are also highlighted with the street names, bordered by Ring Road, and also highlighted with the main natural feature that we have, which is the Nile. And we really wanted to keep this hybrid form overlaid on top of it because we wanted to keep the sense of orientation. We wanted to keep the familiarity, the sense of familiarity that people would have from the old map to this new map that we created. So basically, yeah, this is the old map that we had, and this is the new map that we created. And also, the map didn't just show the network, we also kind of showed the network that was going to open up, and also the connection to the light rail system, because RTP-Dev also operated the light rail system. This is why it was essential to show the connection that it had with the future system, so bridging both the inner city and the outer city areas. And when we when the project was launched, we were actually very surprised by the amount of I would say interaction and reaction that we got from the social media, and also it got put on TV presenters, and TV presenters get to talk about it, and also it got referenced in some conferences. So we were very happy with the amount of reaction that this map kind of pulled out. And basically, this is what we wanted to do. If we go back to, for example, Vinelli's iconic map, where it was designed schematically at some point in 1972, but then people started really hating this map, and it only lasted for 7 years, where they had to revert it back to the geographic map. And this is because this basically doesn't really compare to our situation. We can't really compare us to New York for having, or for saying that we have a geographic map like them. But really, it's more about saying that there is a lot of people that really influence the design, and people really kind of have this really strong dependency on those designs and those passenger information systems, which we wanted to create with our maps. We wanted people to realize, we wanted people to realize that there is a passenger information system. And also, I know maybe map illiteracy here is a really harsh word to say when we say that we're map illiterate. No, we're not map illiterate. We can read a perfect map that has just 3 lines, which was really easy to design. But it's really about creating this connection between people and a passenger information system, where they start to realize, and they start to see, and they start to depend on, just like the map of New York, where people just rejected it and they had to change it all over again for the people. So yeah, so that's our map. This wasn't our only map. I just wanted to show you another version of the map, where we designed one for a bus transit network that showed for another bus operator that's called Moslat Mosr. So basically, it shows the network of the metro lines in association with also the whole city. We have the Nile, we have the Ring Road, and also all the bus network that connects the outer city, or the new urban communities, to the inner cities as well. We also created a multimodal map, which isn't quite multimodal, I would say. It only kind of shows the main transit lines that are operating until now. So we have the network, we have the metro network map, and we have the LRT map. And you can actually see the contrast, and how really the city, which was just this much, now exploded. And we have a huge, I would say, transit system that is initiated to kind of cover up for this map, for the city. So yeah, so this is one of the main issues, dealing with this kind of unfamiliarity, unawareness of passenger information, and really hope with this kind of initiation of the PIS systems that it kind of gives this connection or creates this connection. But also we had a really big issue when we tried to create those maps is that we didn't have any access to data. As we were saying, we're data per country and we needed to do things ourselves. So for example, for creating, for example, something like a local map, we needed to map all the entrances and exits ourselves. We needed to map all the parking places, all the access points, whether they're underground, for example, tunnels or overground bridges. We had to do everything ourselves on site, of course, with the help of field researchers that we hire. But I think it's one of the really challenging points that, or just, this is just to, show a little bit of the problem because it kind of goes with other things. And also to talk about the idea of not having data. So for example, when I was talking about this initiative that we wanted to create a sustainable transport guide for the mobility system in COP27. COP27 was hosted in Sharm el-Sheikh, which is a coastal city. And it's more like a resort city. They didn't really have a very complicated, sustainable network. But because the city was going to host a lot of delegates and attendees, we wanted to, or they wanted to at that time, to create this sustainable mobility system, which we really had a hard time getting data just to put it on the maps. We had a lot of stakeholder negotiations. We had to talk to a lot of, I would say, a lot of operators, a lot of people in order to get this kind of data. And honestly, the results were amazing. So those are the amount of operators that I'm talking about. We're talking about people that work with last mile solutions, people that work with bus operators and also electric cars and electric car stations and other operators. So we had to kind of consult all of those people, and they had to give us data which was changing all the time until COP because everything was changing. And this is where we had a map, a multimodal map that shows the bus lines that were initiated at that time and its connection to last mile solutions, or I would say, in this case, like areas where there would be bike sharing systems or scooter areas, or like georeferenced areas where there would be scooters and so on and so forth. We also created a cycling map, and in order to do this map, we had to go there to Sharm el-Sheikh twice. So we went there first before the COP27, like before the COP on 2 months to kind of map the area and see the different road intersection areas. So for example, where does the bike lanes exist and how are they existing, whether they're shared, whether whether they're protected and so on. So we had to go there inside and do that. And after we did that exercise, we revisited Sharm el-Sheikh with our maps to kind of validate the data that we collected in order to have the guide ready. And we were surprised by the amount of development that happened just in a month with all the new bike lanes and all the infrastructure that was being built on spot. So it was a really big challenge with really working with no data and data that you had to acquire yourself and validate yourself on site. But in the end, we had a beautiful map that says, okay, we have those bike lanes, and if you want to go to Sharm el-Sheikh, we can depend on this map, basically. So the last thing about data, and this is, I think, the essence of what TFC works with, is mapping paratransits. And when we say paratransit is more of a reaction that comes with the lack of the institutional capacity to support or supply for formal bus systems. So people kind of self-organize, they have their own small-scale operations where they have their own vehicles and kind of drive or be part of this transportation network, as Yogos was perfectly explaining to us. And us as TFC, we're working mainly with mapping those systems, and also we kind of initiated in some of those projects to actually supply for transit maps for those systems. So for example, in Lusaka, which was in Zambia, we, after digitizing the database, their paratransit network, which is extensive, we offered also to create a transit map for the network. And of course, the transit map it was very hectic because you have a lot of lines from those bus networks that were digitized. You have around 600 bus stops because bus stops are, they're not really designed, they're virtual bus stops. And why are they virtual? Is because we kind of create them or we pinpoint them from people just stopping around anywhere. So when there are clusters or when people stop at areas in higher volumes, we just create this virtual bus stop for it. And also we have around 66 which are more formal bus stations. So in order to create a map that has all this kind of data, we had to go through a really rough or a really extensive, I would say, filtration process to the data that we have. So for example, we had trips that had to be grouped to routes. So when the trip was going two-way, we consider that a route. When we have a duplicate routes, and that is that they have the same origins and destinations, or origins and destinations that are within 500-meter buffer, we exclude one of them. And also, if we have a parent route and a child route, we exclude all the child routes to have this map. So, oops. From the map that I just showed, or the Lusaka map, the very GIS map that I showed in the beginning, this is the transit map that we have, which shows the 136 trips that are designed only into 54 routes. And you'll also see the 630 bus stops that are also filtered down using the onboard surveys. So for example, if the onboards were quite significant in some areas, we only put those on the map. And ones that sound official. So for example, we can't just put on a barber shop on the map. It has to be more official. So this didn't really end there. Actually, it didn't start there. We had previously another map that was created for Kampala, and it shows around 600 routes, 600 trips that were also designed in 139 routes. But because the routes were a bit too extensive, we had to split those into two maps. So we have the intercity map, and also we have the intracity map. The intracity map shows the inner transit map coverage within the city, while the other one shows a more intercity connection where it connects to the other city. So we had to separate data into two separate maps in this case. And finally, this was actually maybe the first official map that we created after having the digital data that we started off in the beginning, 2016. So we started to design, or we took the initiative to design one map for one of the urban communities in Cairo, which is called the 6th of October. And we decided to map all the formal, the paratransit network within those in one map. So in order to do that, we also had to go for the solution where we had to also split the map into an intercity and outer city map. But honestly, the map is quite interesting because you see all the formal networks and all the Suzuki routes and all the box routes, and also you can see the connection where you have at certain interchanges where it changes with formal routes or other modes for the intercity map to get outside of 6th of October. And really we didn't know how to design those maps. We had no idea how people reacted to those maps. So when we first did this map, which was our first formal / paratransit map just in one place, we sat with people, we did this market research, and we kind of understood and interacted with drivers and people to know how this system or how the maps are really working. Are they good? Are they not good? And so on. And this kind of created the design base that we built on the Kampala and the Lusaka transit maps combined. So I would love to kind of end this a bit with the work that we also did with people on creating a wayfinding system for two of the big interchanges that we have in Egypt. One that interchanges with the light rail system, and one that interchanges within the city. So unfortunately, I wasn't part of this project, but I say that I'm very proud of it because I think it's first of its kind that we create this wayfinding system. And this project basically was developed from a lot of research on wayfinding protocols and so on. So we had this very extensive data collection and analysis where we, of course, understood all the physical elements, the current design systems, the user experiences, and on all those kind of sort of stuff. And just to show you a little bit of the things that they did at that time, I think it's pretty cool to see the way that they analyzed also the user personas and how this kind of took shape in order to also understand their circulation vertically within the different interchange or the different modes, and how this also was done for people with disabilities, and how this kind of translated also with the different personas on the inner circulation within the stations. And of course, this created the beautiful signage system. Unfortunately, I can't show you like real-life photos because we still don't have this system implemented, but I would say that it was a very challenging and a very interesting experience because we never had this done in Cairo before. And we hope really for one day that we see it implemented on site. Yep, and that's it.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mariam? Yes.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I was actually more curious about the paratransit maps of Lusaka and Kampala. From what I know, at least, about paratransit is, of course, most of the routes are informal, and sometimes it would also take a lot of effort to try to codify it. Like what we did in Indonesia is also we have a lot of those paratransit systems, and we tried to when we try to design maps for them, we kind of also have to help codify the system. Like it's just my curiosity, is the system in Lusaka and Kampala is already codified, like with route numbers or something, or it's just like the map, you don't really add route numbers on it?
I'm not sure about the Kampala system, but I think for Lusaka, the routes were established and they were like licensed and everything, but I think the problem was that they do change a lot. Like the way how people basically operate on those routes would change a lot, and I think it depends also on the demand. And I think it's quite challenging. Like working with paratransit is it's a very dynamic system, and probably this map could go like outdated in a really short time. But for our process of doing stuff, of course, I was introducing the Route Lab application that we had, and that Route Lab application, we use it to do several things. So for example, we do something that is called an identification survey. I'm not really a technical person, but I'll try to explain it. So for example, we do something that is called an identification survey, where people take the buses and travel those buses, and they identify it on the application for the routes. And then they do a frequency survey just to see how frequent those buses go out from the stations, as to kind of give it this, kind of a rational scheduling scheme. And then they also do those onboard surveys where they kind of see where people board and alight, to also say that, okay, we might be having potential clusters or stops at certain areas. So it's kind of our way to, rationalize the system and kind of put it into a GTFS feed that maybe could be used or analyzed futuristically. But yeah, we had to actually work on the codes. Like for the Lusaka map, if I'm talking purely about the map that we designed, we had to codify it ourselves. We had to, actually I can go back to that to explain it a bit more. So for the map of Lusaka, they had a very centralized system. All the buses would start from 4 main interchange areas. And we did the coding system based on where they started from. For example, if they start from the city market, they would take the code C, and all the routes that would come from there would be codified as, for example, C1, C2, and so on. So we took those points as the main interchanges, and we kind of pulled out the codes from there to do our own codifying system and do our own, legend, basically, for those routes.
But it wasn't there previously then?
No.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Anyone else? No? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we will have a quick 20-minute break, or not so quick, 20-minute break. You have coffee and refreshments outside, and then after that, we'll come back with Sergio. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. If you can grab your seats. All right, we're going to continue the presentations with Sergio Luc from T-Cartor, a Brit living in Fontainebleau in France.
I get to that bit.
Yes. So thank you, Sergio.
Okay. Good morning, NYUAD, and I guess hello, YouTube. That's one ambition ticked off this morning. Yep. Who am I? My name is Sergio Luc. I'm Principal Advisor with T-Cartor. So I'll start by just saying a few words about who T-Cartor are. We are a merry band of cartographers, developers, GIS practitioners. We are based in sometimes sunny, not always southern Sweden. About an hour just over on the Swedish side of this rather beautiful and famous Öresund Bridge, or Bridge and Tunnel. And we were born in 1985. So we are 1 year away from celebrating our 40th birthday. You're all invited next year, by the way. So I wish I was still 1 year away from celebrating my 40th birthday, but that's another matter. Who do we work with? Well, we principally, on the part of T-Cartor that I work for, we principally work with city and transport authorities, people you might have heard of, such as the New York DOT and the MTA, the City of Toronto, Transport for London, which is actually my past in a previous life, SL in Stockholm, Ile-de-France Mobilité in the Paris region, and manufacturers such as Siemens. And what do we do for them? Well, essentially we do maps. We are, as I said, cartographers, but we design, build, and deploy cartographic databases, mapping systems, most probably visible and famous for large-scale pedestrian wayfinding systems such as Walk NYC and Legible London. And our maps support, obviously, public transport, but also active modes such as cycling and walking. We are not really designers. I remember when I joined the UITP committee about 5 years ago, I started with an apology saying that nobody at T-Cartor actually had design in their job title. That's actually changed fairly recently, but we still struggle a little bit with the mantle of designers. We're more map nerds, I guess. We're proud to say that for each of these projects, we are the only original part of the consortium still working in things such as Legible London and Walk NYC. And for a system such as Legible London, we manage, this is the extent of it, somewhere behind all these map frames, you'll see a geographic outline of London, and there are around about 11,000 location-specific maps that we deploy, manage, maintain, update on behalf of Transport for London. So yes, some of the things we do, these are some examples. I wanted this to really symbolize how we view our products, both as maybe pieces of art, but that's very subjective, but more to think of the entry points to the transport network, to the transport system, as if it was an art gallery. So you want to put your best offer on display to try and entice as many people into your system as possible. This kind of mixed metaphor of a bus shelter art gallery, with the maps being the thing that calls you in, that brings you in, that advertises the service that you're offering, presents the best of your network. So that's T-Cartor. a slightly more personal introduction, inspired by the very warm welcome that I've received since I arrived in the UAE a couple of days ago. I am half English, half Trinidadian, with a Portuguese name, depending on who asks me. I could say Portuguese, Spanish, Italian. I can change it. But currently living in France, working for a Swedish company, standing to you today at the Abu Dhabi campus of an American university as the host, hosted by, or the guest of, an Italian associate professor, invited here by a French Canadian and a Serb who was raised in France, who currently lives in Spain. So, and of course, as I've been informed, that NYUAD has 110 nationalities present here, and I absolutely love this. And I think it's been said a few times. It's been said a few times in the symposium, really. But there is something about transport, and maybe there's something about transport mapping in particular that brings people together. And I think right now we could all do with a little bit more togetherness. So that's probably about as serious note as I'm going to make in the whole talk. But today the title is In Stasis, Designing Static Information for a Dynamic World. But maybe the subtitle should be, Are we still relevant? Am I still relevant? Maybe I'm having a midlife crisis, but this is all I've been thinking about. And are we still relevant today in a digital world? I've shown you that what we primarily produce at T Carter is maps that end up printed, so static information. And yet, all around us, we're bombarded by influences that are dynamic. You know, our transport system, our cities, we're not slowing down anytime soon. And a huge proportion of what we do still goes up as something that was produced essentially in the past. And it's kind of a promise of what might be happening now or might be happening in the future, but it's a static piece of information. And we keep on asked, like, are we still aligned with the needs of the modern user? You know, they ask us this, and of course you've probably heard this, and maybe you've even asked this question yourself, doesn't everybody just use Google now, or Apple? But who are these days? When we really care about the work that we do, we care about detail, we care about accuracy. This is actually the process that we went through, a very manual process to actually build the Legible London database in the first place, was literally to sit there with about 1,600 huge printouts, each of a plot, and manually mark them up. And it was 11 months of just solid work, but incredibly engaging at the same time. You can get people around a single table, get your pens out, your highlighters. It's very tactile, it's very manual, but it's very engaging. And we care about that. But here we are today at a time when perhaps more than ever users just want a quick answer rather than the best answer. This is the kind of the environment that we're working in. And I said that we keep on asking, are we still relevant? Who asked us this was actually our customers. Our clients are asking this. This is a survey conducted by Transport for London a couple of years ago now, but I think the findings are still hold true now, about future-proofing Legible London. You know, is it still relevant today when everybody carries around a smartphone and everybody can navigate theoretically at will? And, well, the answer, spoiler alert, thankfully, yes, we're still relevant, okay? Short talk, that's it, done, no. And to be honest, that should not be a surprise to anybody in this room. We know that static information still has significant benefits, even in 2024. Obviously offers confirmation, it offers reassurance, it's a trusted source, it can convey authority. It can be integrated easily with other information systems. Not everybody can or wants to use their mobile phone at all times. So yeah, static information still has its place. But just to quickly call back to Jug's slide from yesterday morning and what we are going to move on to Dubai and present to the UITP MENA Congress tomorrow morning. We are now placing that within a framework which up until now I always thought, is it an opposition thing? Is it basically static versus dynamic? Is it digital versus print? But it's not. These things exist together in a kind of framework, and they can be complementary. They don't need to be, sort of against each other. But yet, I think there's still a perception that static information at some point will be the past, and we'll have moved on to this, bright new future where everything is live, real time, and digital, maybe. It's just that we imagined it would be a lot quicker. So we managed probably it's going to be a straightforward, linear journey from starting all the way down there. When you work in a very static environment, you have a very static output. Maybe then you progress slightly to a more manual process. Maybe if you're lucky, you get to hybrid and then eventually develop like dynamic outputs. Eventually, this is maybe the perceived end goal is to have everything fully automated, whatever that might mean. But the reality, of course, is not a linear straight line at all. And this is probably not even true. We're somewhere around here in the middle where, of course, we're all things at once. We are static, dynamic, manual, and automated all at the same time. And really, this is where we're finding ourselves. And this, for me, is the most fascinating thing, I think, at the moment. As I started to think about what I'd like to talk to you about today, and I was thinking about this idea of, are we still relevant? The more I looked into it, I found something really interesting happening, that I think that dynamic information, or the design of dynamic information, now feeding back into static information. So there are elements that have maybe been introduced through the design of interactive and dynamic systems that now static information is reflecting. So there's this kind of feedback loop that's happening, but that's probably enough metaphors for the moment. So let's start looking at some actual examples. I'll start right at the beginning, right at the base, literally with a base map, and thinking about base map styles. And of course, we'll all be familiar now that in the digital realm, online, you can, as a user, you can manipulate the actual base map that you see, and that can be tailored for different purposes. So you can start with something here like OpenStreetMap's so-called standard base map. So it's what I think of as very naturalistic styling. So greens for green space, blues for water features, a more kind of brick, earthy brown color for the built-up areas, maybe the industrial. The rail lines are very heavy, to kind of reflect their actual physical nature. Then in the digital world, of course, you can very easily, seamlessly switch to an adapted base map. Here we have OSM's cycling base, where you still get some of the naturalistic styling, you still get some of the greens, and you see the blues coming through, of course. But then the built-up has been pushed back, that's been generalized a lot more, and now the kind of cycle possibilities are brought forward, all the way through to something like OSM's transport map, which really just shows or highlights the roads that are taken by public transport. So, of course, there are other pieces of information shown here. Hubs are named or stops are named. But I've been thinking, what would this look like if we kind of took this principle and we adapted it, or we transferred it into the static or the printed world? So we start off with a product that is a real one, a live one for the City of Toronto project. These are local area maps at TTC stations in Toronto, and here this is the actual styling that we use, and again it's very naturalistic. You have greens for green space, you have actually this kind of this blue is meant to be a theme on the whole of the City Toronto system. It's meant to reflect the actual colour of the roofs when viewed from a bird's eye perspective. But I wanted to start to play with this to see if I could make it more adapted for its actual real use, which is to highlight the transport network. So, well, okay, what if we drain the colour out of it? And thankfully this display is incredibly good at draining colour out of anything. So this is just an automated grayscale recoloring in Illustrator. This is no thought involved as well, literally just apply that automatically. But then just to do it with a slightly more purposeful, intentful aim, maybe max out the contrast, see if you can really simplify the shapes of the road network, try to highlight where the buses may run, but that's probably not enough because now you've kind of lost, everything's maybe a bit too flat. So what you can do, maybe that shows just about well enough. So you can then just bring up, when you've got everything else knocked back, you can then bring back up the transport network. And maybe if you zoom in a little bit, you can see that slightly better. Where now the focus is primarily just through the use of color. Things that are colored are what you're interested in, things that are grayscale you're less interested in, and it's the transport that comes to the fore. And it's actually quite neat, quite useful that TTC's kind of brand color is red, so that's a very strong standout against the grayscale background. This is just a proof of concept, it's not live, maybe just as well, Alex, I think. It's not a real concept, it's not polished in any way. But for an example which definitely is a lot more refined and polished, I'd like to introduce the work of Aurélien Boyer-Morish, who's a French-Portuguese cartographer, and an incredible collector of transport maps, city maps, all kinds of maps that we might be talking about here this week, where he's done a very similar thing. He's used extreme contrast of greys and very dark, almost black lines for the transport network and the kind of red contrast to bring out the route numbers for his map of Turin. And of course, another way that dynamic could be feeding back into static at the moment is this concept of orientation. So obviously with the dynamic map, you're able either at the will of the user, or if the app actually takes control for you, it'll rotate the world around you as you move. And we're all very familiar with this now. We see it every day when we use maps on our phones. But in the static world, of course, this concept has kind of existed for a long time anyway, especially with the legible cities movements, through the concepts of heads-up mapping. Now, you might just about be able to see that well enough. But heads-up mapping is really the idea that the map should look the same way that you are looking as the user. So here we have a pedestrian wayfinding sign along the south bank of the Thames in London, and the map doesn't have north at the top, it has the direction that you're facing. It's really clear if you see that the river is just the other side of this barrier here. The map is looking the same way. So it theoretically lowers the cognitive load on the user. They can just glance at the map as they're walking past and don't even need to really break their journey. They can keep on walking. Or, and this is going to maybe call back to the interesting discussion we had yesterday about distortion and compression of certain areas. You can play with that idea that you don't have to stick with static geographic mapping. You don't have to have north at the top as default. You can distort and you can play with this. Here's an example from Auckland, Newmarket in near the city centre of Auckland, where this is with north at the top, but you can see this area at Newmarket, it has a kind of natural dogleg feel. And the problem with this very narrow formatted product, which has to sit within a frame that's very narrow and is positioned on a bus stop, it makes it slightly awkward to position the transport information, these boxes, these tabs around. You can't really do it too neatly. So what you might do to try and avoid or manipulate this kind of dogleg effect is just very subtly rotate the map within a certain tolerance. So now you don't have north at the top. North is now somewhere over there, but instantly you've created this kind of grid-like axis, almost along cardinal degrees, where you can much more easily, you've created space for yourself to then align the tabs on a grid. And that just makes it easier to read. It's, you can contrast maybe maybe it's a bit too subliminal in this particular example, but you can kind of contrast the rigidity and the sort of 90-degree angles of the transport information against the more slightly chaotic real-world base map underneath. Yep. And there's the two side by side. And another tactic, another weapon in your armory for introducing kind of things that are fairly standard in dynamic mapping back into static. It's this idea of focusing. What do I mean by how we focus? Well, with a dynamic map, of course, you can simply zoom in and out. You can either choose the focus of your own accord, you can select things and the map will automatically pan or zoom to that particular location. And the focus, you can drill down several different levels to reveal more information, to reduce the amount of information shown. And of course, that's very obviously a feature of dynamic mapping. But focus is very important for static mapping as well. I want to give you this example here of a project that we're working on in Geneva, where we were asked to come in and redesign their local plan de connexion, so it's the maps that you have up at every stop, and they are focused on hubs. The way that Geneva has arranged their bus and tram network is around this concept of mini hubs everywhere. There's probably around about 100 in the city, and incredibly well standardized concept. But you see with their existing product, before we came in, they had not one but two indexes. So just basically different ways of presenting information, but using this fairly conventional, maybe we'd say quite old school way of presenting static information, is combining a map and then asking people to then make sense of not one here, but two indexes. And you've got to constantly refer between the map and the index and back again. And of course, that creates more cognitive load. That introduces the possibility that people might mislink things and they might not associate things right on the map with the index. So we wanted to be quite brave in redesigning it. It wasn't just going to be an aesthetic redesign. We wanted to actually just get rid of the indexes altogether. No indexes, no legends, no key. Don't explain anything. Just present as if it was a dynamic map, which typically wouldn't have an index. Just present what you want to present in a single view and focus the user. So you just show the transport information. Now, instead of having to refer to it off on one side and then back to the map, it's on the map already. So you can see the location of stops. You can see the direction that the transport is moving in. You can see which services call at each stop, where they might be going. And so that's the general idea there, is to introduce this kind of focus on behalf of the user. Also, with these particular products, we wanted to sort of establish a hierarchy between the transport information, and then the area information underneath to provide, again, to help provide with focus. And we did that through sort of applying sort of a simulation of depth. So the transport information is given this kind of drop shadow effect where it literally looks as if it's above the actual representation of the streets. And everything, if we go back, everything that you see actually above the base map has this kind of drop shadow effect. It more or less comes out on the screen. But it's just to separate it, have that separation, so you can quickly scan, you can make maybe a different, you can pick out easily what is transport information and what is base map without really consciously having to work it through. And you can arrange these tabs in the hierarchy of their own. I won't go into the details here, but basically there's 6, maybe 7 different levels of tabs going through depending on exactly where you're positioned as to how much information they show, what the information is, how specific it might be to a particular stop or more to like a hub level of information. We did this kind of very, probably too subtle again, effect, trying to simulate what you experience when you use a digital dynamic map product. Is this kind of coloring in of the actual stop that is the focus point, as if you'd selected it, as if you'd actually has a sort of on-off state. But we, again, tried to implement that in a static environment on behalf of the user. And yeah, that's just a little bit more about the levels there. So as I said, you have this transport information that's meant to be really hovering above the base map itself, and then creates that shadow underneath. Another thing we tried to do just with text, because the way that I guess we've all been trained now to look at anything, and I find myself doing this, doesn't matter if it's a screen, doesn't matter if it's print, I cannot read from top to bottom anymore. I just cannot do it. So I scan. And even if it's printed and it's a book, I find myself going in at the middle of the page and then back to the top and then down, and it's so mind-numbingly frustrating for me. I cannot unprogram this now. But being aware of this fact, we wanted to allow people to scan the different kind of levels of text that you might find on a map such as that, just by the way that we arrange the text, that we lay out the text itself. So if it's a point of interest, then the text will be horizontal, and this is lucky, 99.9% of points of interest labels are more than one word, so you can introduce a line break. So if it's horizontal and it has a line break, then we're trying to encode that that's a point of interest. Versus the roads, where they're always going to be on a single line, they're always going to be aligned with the road itself. So just to kind of separate the two things, you have obviously the font is the same, the color is slightly different. I know you can't see that. The point size might be the same, I'm not too sure. It's very similar anyway if it's not exactly the same, but the way we treat the text is different, and that is enough just to create this kind of hierarchy between different types of text. And then the last one, there's only 2 examples in this particular map. It's to again bring back our old friend, the drop shadow. I know for a lot of designers, drop shadows are illegal. I love them, sorry. And this is for area names. Again, the thing with an area, especially in a city like Geneva, is that so many people, if it's not legally defined, cannot agree where one area stops and starts. So we try to say, okay, well, this is roughly where Cité is, this is roughly where Plainpalais is, but maybe not. So just to give it this drop shadow as if that text could also be moving, could be kind of raised above the base map. We did want to suggest it was fixed in a particular point. Aurélien, again, I am a fan, I must admit. This is a a map that he's drawn of, I think it's a historical tram network in Buenos Aires. And he's used this kind of both geometry and also this kind of false depth effect, this kind of false 3D effect in his work. And that's actually been quite a big inspiration on what we do. Keep in shape. Really am having a midlife crisis. I know, Yo, this has become a favorite map of mine now as well, and Yuka said it a lot, and I'll pick out one reason why. And you might disagree with me why, but I love this when I realized. It's because it gets rid of this convention where the shape of the lines has to give way for the placement of the text. It's not afraid to let the text just completely sit above the line, so the line shape is retained. And it's the line shape that forms the mental image in your head. Forget the text, doesn't matter. But the actual shape, that's what you want people to have, the network in their mind. And that's compared to... Will he play? Yes. There's another map of a network not too far from Paris, or sometimes it feels like it's a long way, where the actual shape of the map itself has been completely undermined by this hard and fast rule: you cannot let text and line interact. Unfortunately, as the network has developed, especially with new line going on, that kind of memorable shape as it used to be is being degraded more and more. So, this is a shame. One thing that personal devices are not particularly good at is having the physical space for showing the entire network, as I think was referenced already earlier this morning. Often, of course, we got this kind of this particular view, and okay, you can zoom in, zoom out, but you can never really get it to fit the actual shape of the network that you want people to implant in their minds. At least maybe not yet, but what's this? And what is Vision? Sorry, what is Apple Vision Pro? Hold on, did somebody say it? Yes is the right answer. It's a spatial computer. And that's Apple's terminology, of course, but it's perfect. It's perfect for this particular talk because it solves potentially the big problem with that, space. So now you have a theoretically infinite, maybe, not quite, but a much larger canvas on which, apologies, and to Yuka, you could maybe one day do something like that. We'll see. Thought I'd try and introduce a little bit of science. Well, what counts as science in our discipline anyway. Heuristics, which is, I don't know if it was coined by Jakob Nielsen, but it's one of Jakob Nielsen came up with 10 general principles for interaction design. Heuristics are not meant to be hard and fast rules, they're more meant to be rules of thumb. But there's one particular rule of thumb that I love, number 9, which is you should help users recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. And this is obviously something that dynamic tools, dynamic information can do really well because it can adapt to context, it can allow users to retrace their steps or to cancel or whatever it might be to reset. But how does static information perform the same trick? Well, imagine that you are back at Newmarket Station in Auckland. Train's just arrived, and you're running down the stairs, trying to catch the train, and you're presented with this map, this static map. But you're running down the stairs. What do you really need to know? You need to know, is this the train that I need to get? Is it going to go where I want to go? Does this map help you? Maybe. Maybe not in isolation. Does this map help you? Well, it tells you where you might be going. But say if you happen to be intending to go in another direction, in the opposite direction, maybe you prefer to see something like this, where it's a balance of both showing you where you can go from that particular platform and also allowing you, if you've made a mistake and you found the wrong platform, to discover that you should be going to a different platform. So just subtle kind of using color and knockback to kind of use deliberate prejudice. I don't know what the right term would be. But just to allow you to realize you may have made a mistake. And I don't know why, but this is not common among static signage, especially in London and Paris, in cities I guess I know the best. It's kind of showing what's behind you effect. There's a 3 alongside. I just want to end by maybe after kind of argue for the relevance of static information, show how it can still justify itself in our dynamic world. Just give you a quick warning against complacency maybe for static information, and how sometimes static tends to be still too attached to old, maybe decades old standards and practices, and it's a bit too dogmatic in that respect. I'd like to do that by taking you back to my childhood, a long time ago. But I was a child who grew up on the Central Line in London. I grew up on the eastern end of the Central Line. And what I did and what I realized when I had children of my own, what people do when they navigate, of course, along a line, how do you tell people when you're going to get off, where you're going to, what the destination is? Very simple, you count stops. I mean, it's, again, very obvious, but children can do this from perhaps even before they can properly read. They can just make out that some words are different, and you can tell them, oh, it's in 5-stop time, and they're able to count the stops. But what do you count? When you're counting the stops, you're not counting these. These are the stops. You're counting the labels. And the problem is that if you are really rigid in your design rules and you say, okay, text and lines must not interact ever, no matter what, it forces you to place what you're counting on different sides of the linear here, and it must slow down people's ability to count along a line and say, well, Leighton to Hainault, how many stops is that? Well, okay, it's 1, 2, I'm up there, down, and it slows you down. It's not optimal, that's for sure. Conversely, there are obviously examples. Yo showed them in his presentation, and I will mirror that now, where you can have the text incredibly standardized at the top. And you might think, yep, absolutely, I can count this very easily. I can see 5 stops from now. I know what it might be. But be careful, because you might think maybe if you're heading towards the right, it's not neither east, west, north, or southbound here, but if you're heading towards the right from the Lycée through to Président Hollande, Raymond Aron, Georges Mandel, then you might think that would be the order, because that's the order that you see the text, 1, 2, 3, 4, going from left to right. But you would be wrong. The actual true order of the stops is as shown at the top. And that's because you then have to go from incredibly well-presented text, very standardized, to then make sense of what the actual network is doing underneath. And this represents the actual sequence of stops. And of course, then you have the problem of having to tie the stops in with the labels. So problems with both approaches. This can be very difficult to achieve in this particular format, of course. It's very hard to represent, especially bus services in the Parisian region. They do some very interesting things, very odd services sometimes, lots of exceptions. But yep, static information's got to be thought through. I don't know if this is an oxymoron, but should static information be allowed to move fast and break things? Now, this is a little bit of a non-fashionable phrase anymore. I think it used to be adopted by, was it Facebook who first came up with this? Or maybe it was Google. Anyway, definitely not fashionable. But the idea is, of course, in the dynamic world, it seems to me like apps and digital is given more license to be innovative, to be different, to try new things, to try and tackle problems that haven't been solved by static information. But can we empower static information in the same way that digital is allowed to do? Just in conclusion, if we are in this transition between all static to all digital, and of course we're in the middle of it, this transition is going to be an incredibly long one, no matter what we might think, no matter how quickly we think that digital technology is going to be universal. It's going to be an incredibly long transition, and we might not actually complete it. We might always have static information. So we should just keep that in mind, be realistic. So if you are a designer of static information, or just you love it, and I think a lot of us are in this room, take care of it. Seek to improve its impact, its completeness. A huge problem, we should not overlook this fact, is that there's so many networks out there that just don't have information full stop. A lot of bus networks in Germany, for instance, there is no information at the bus stop about where those buses might go. In fact, that's common for buses all over. Static and dynamic, of course, can be complementary. Not have to fight for supremacy. They can be part of the overall system. And of course, static information, it has value, but ultimately, good cartography is good cartography, regardless of the channel. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergio. Any questions? Yes.
Hi. First of all, thank you for the wonderful presentation on T-Carter and what you did as a project. My question is that you mentioned about OpenStreetMaps, and you mentioned that there is the normal layer where you say it looks earthy and whatnot. My question is that on the OpenStreetMap itself, can you change the appearance, for example, the colors from the original one to, let's say, your one that you showed there for your wayfinding or something like that? Yeah.
And the short answer is yes. You can restyle the layers as you require. Much harder would be to change the actual geometry, the shape of things as they're represented. But just to restyle is a fairly simple process, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? No, I have a question.
Sure.
How do you move fast and break things?
I don't know. I actually... Probably the mantra should be go slowly and maintain things. Honestly, the biggest problem is a lack of long-term thinking. And this is true even with customers that we've had for literally decades, where there's a lot of money, or there's relatively a lot of money at the beginning of a project. So for a capital project, you know, it's funded. The money runs out very quickly, and there's very rarely, one or two exceptions, the money to keep it going long term. And that I find very baffling, that it's just not treated as essential, as a necessity. It's still thought of as, oh, let's try this project now. It's a cool mapping thing. We redesign something, we add a new product here. But no, it needs to be maintained. Otherwise, as soon as it loses its accuracy, its relevancy, its recency, then the whole system falls apart. So maintenance is everything.
I think very interesting talk. And when I have been teaching generally wayfinding to students, I always make it a point, because nowadays UX has become a buzzword. And there are more people who are getting trained in UX by doing a 2 weeks course and saying that I know heuristics. Okay, so that's a tough challenge in front of us. But I think this is a very interesting points that you mentioned of comparison. And whenever I introduce wayfinding, I actually tell them that wayfinding and placement of information should work with these 10 principles. And they exactly apply in a phase where you actually physically move. So thanks for bringing it up, and I just got a confidence that yes, what I was saying makes sense. The second part that I wanted to ask you is have you ever tried monetizing these maps? So I'll just give you an example that once we did one map and we approached few locations around the station.
Yep.
And said, okay, you have a shop, we'll put your shop name over here, and are you ready to pay for it? And I could see people getting interested into it. So have you ever tried that?
So I will extend that question on behalf of our customers, the transport authorities, the city authorities. Have they ever tried? Yes. Have they ever been successful? No. And as a purist, I'm happy with that. As a pragmatist, maybe not so much. But the problem is that if you allow people to pay for their presence on the map, then essentially you'll end up with a base map like Google's, where people are literally paying to be on the map, because to be off the map is to not exist. And what does that mean? It means that you have a map that is not optimized for the purpose that you really want to optimize it for: transport, pedestrian wayfinding, cycle wayfinding. And so maybe you end up having to develop different executions of the same product just to cater for those different audiences, and each one is non-optimal. So that would be the problem with sort of paying to be on the map. Of course, some people don't use literal money, they use more soft power to influence whether they're on or not. The thing I like about Legible London, the principle of Legible London, is that something is shown because it's good for wayfinding. So is it big? Is it architecturally interesting? Does it have a huge sign on the outside so somebody can see it on the map and immediately reference it? It doesn't matter if it's a commercial, if it's private, if it's, worthy, a traditional point of interest. Is it good for wayfinding? And that's the metric. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Oh, another question.
Hi, thank you for your talk. I guess a realization I had was the transition between static and dynamic mapping is to sort of have more types of maps or more unique maps to sort of showcase these different situations that you were talking about, like the different strategies of reorientation and focus. I feel like that's sort of the natural progression of having things be less cognitively heavy for the user to use. But how do you sort of balance that uniqueness with the standardization of like let's say a transport company or a client would rather have less maps because it's easier to install and easier to maintain? How do you balance how much uniqueness you need for these types of maps, and how do you convince like clients that, oh, this is actually what's needed for this situation, rather than just a blanket solution of like one map designed for everything?
Very good question. I don't think we'd ever argue for less maps, so more maps is great. But in all seriousness, the thing I've realized is, as we're producing these maps that are specific to a particular location, is that they're not the type of map that maybe we would sort of take home and study and pore over and close and bring back the next day and look at it again and find new things. They're meant to be functional. They're meant to be that you literally can get the information as you're walking past, or you can just reference it in 10 seconds, 15 seconds, find what you need and move on. Because it's for transport, right? It's for an environment where you don't want people to dwell. You don't want them to occupy the space when there might be other people behind them who also need that same information. So they've got to be performant in that way. And then the success or not just comes down to measurement. You know, is that map actually performing its purpose? And if it's not, then the operators will tell you very quickly.
Yeah, I was also wondering, because you mentioned the Apple Vision Pro, and
Whoops.
I was I was wondering, how do you like speculate, or what are your visions for the future of mapping and wayfinding, like 5, 10, 15 years? How do you think it might affect, change the way you design maps and generally experience the world?
I don't know. I've started to not really think too much about the future. I think it's a little bit like we had an experience with waiting for a bus a couple of days ago, which was always 5 minutes away. 5 minutes later, 5 minutes away. It's a bit like the future for mapping. It's always, you know, it's coming next year. Or automated driving, all these things that are potentially promised in 6 months, 1 year, and they're still 6 months or 1 year or 2 years or 5 years away. Whereas the core needs can still be addressed right now by existing, maybe not attractive. It's not, I didn't want to mention AI or anything like that, although I'm sure that's going to be brought up at some point. Some say, what about AI and wayfinding? Please no, but probably it's going to come very soon. So I don't know if the future is, you know, us all walking around with things, augmented reality devices on our face. Maybe it will be in 10 years' time, 20 years' time, something like that. And you can imagine that the ability not just to, as actually Zach demonstrated it yesterday, it's not the ability to tailor one map for one specific use, it's to tailor that map for one specific user. And that is really interesting. So if that's the future, I welcome it.
Move on to the panel. Sorry, no more questions. Thank you very much, Sergio.
My pleasure.
Okay, so up next we have the mapping panel with Hugh, Ilya, and who else? Who's the? Sergio. Oh, right. Yes. So yeah, sorry, you're not done, Sergio.
We stop at 1:15? Okay, perfect. Okay, super exciting again. Thank you all, thank you all, thank you very much. Can't believe I'm so excited, and still there's, you know, some of the people that still was waiting for, listen to us, they still have to talk, so it's amazing. I'll start now this way from you, because no, I do have the perfect question, because someone said in map we trust, right? How and why?
Well, it's working. Yeah. It's a strange thing I realized 10 years ago when I started really working on transit maps, is nobody questions a map. You give someone a map, he just takes it for granted that it's the truth revealed. You take newspapers and read an article. Depending on what newspaper is, you know if it's leaning more towards this option or that option, who is writing it, is it really true, are they trying to manipulate me? Not with maps. You take a map, it's just true. You don't question it. So for us cartographers, it's a fantastic tool because you can manipulate people because they believe your map, but at the same time, you have to be very careful because you have a huge responsibility in manipulating people. If they find out your tool is dead, you cannot use it anymore. So we enter into ethics with that. What are the maps for? Because no map is neutral, every map is political, because you as a cartographer choose what will be on the map and what will not be on the map, because you cannot have everything on. So you must make choices. You cannot be neutral.
You want to add? Yes.
Working?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not sure. I think that what you were talking about, where you were like drawing a line between static and dynamic, is not where I would draw the line. I would draw the line maybe between personal and public, which is close to what you were giving as an example, because you were referring to like Google Maps and fixed maps on stations or whatever. But I think when it gets dynamic, when everything gets dynamic, the separation between personal and public still remains. We will still have maybe some virtual displays projected into air, I don't know, which are available to everyone, and we will have some magic devices which are in our pockets or on our eyes, which know everything about us and which are for us. And I think maps will be always there. There will be some forms of them. We've seen so many different kinds of maps, so many different approaches to mapping. 3D, some perspective maps when you need to show some vertical city with some part which is far, far away, like everything. And there are so much more maps that we haven't seen, but most of us have seen somewhere else. And we all had some examples that we could maybe add to some talks. So, and we will get more of that. As we get more mediums, as we get more devices, more ways to present those maps, we will get more maps, we will get more ways to interact with maps. And again, as you said, everyone is accustomed to maps. Everyone, when you were saying about newspapers, I was thinking, before you finished your sentence, that in a newspaper, when you illustrate some event that had any relationship to like place on Earth or in a city, they would show a map, and it's just the most obvious thing to do, to show the place. So everyone understands that. So I think, yeah, we are gonna be relevant, even there will be no printing whatsoever, because somebody will have to do all these things anyway.
I think the only thing I'd really add is, and Jürg's really touched on it already, the power of a map, to the subliminal power of mapping, and the way it almost literally shapes your image of your surroundings. You know, as Kevin Lynch said, the image of the city, and something we've really realized for several decades now. Yeah, that's not going away. That's always going to be there. One interesting comment I had recently from a customer, not really against mapping, but just be careful what you show, was that they were trying to be really useful and helpful and show when their rail network was disrupted and they had line closures on and different information about this weekend, that weekend, and you can't go here, and but we're doing it for improvement work there, but then a month later there'll be something else, and they thought, we'll communicate this via the medium of a map. And the comments they got back were, this is making me trust you less, because I look at this and all I see is exceptions. So almost don't tell me that things are going to be messed up, like just tell me what's your core offer, and maybe introduce, the disruption element subtly at certain times through different channels, but be careful about representing on a map, because that just says to me that your actual real world network is not reliable. So I found that very interesting.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you so much for ending your talk the way you ended, reassuring. I was already, ready to reassure that we will still be relevant, but you eloquently put it. And I think going back to what we discussed also yesterday, to make bold statements and something, I want to propose a bold statement, and then you can, elaborate on that. I want to be safe, so I'd say 60 years from now, 50 years from now, I won't be there, so who cares? Apple Vision Pro will be just ranked as one of fiasco because, nobody actually engage in the trade-off of wearing a mask, and helmet on their face all time around. And we would appreciate the fact that there's even a transportability, for example, of small paper maps. And we will we will rethink an approach to what is possible in the digital realm, just because it's possible. So we would have, to quote my friend Roberto Casetti, we would rebel against this digital colonialism, and we would have discovered that's something that makes us humans. That's something that's why, if you think about it, it's quite incredible that 3,000 years old map and a contemporary map, they are extremely similar. It's not that, oh my, we advanced so much in cartography. We've been more sophisticated, but the basic principle is there, because maybe they are attached to the same things that we evolved. And for example, when we relate to each other, we will always relate the visu rather than, oh no, let's put a face, an artificial, and let our persona or our avatar talk. So how do you see, again, the relevance of the map? Is it something that we have to, because you briefly mentioned, hey, we're entering ethics here, and I really want that. It's a fantastic opportunity to claim a role. Every map is political, and we're dealing with ethics. My goodness, our role is then important. Hey, people in the world, stop talking about calling in a philosopher or a theologian or a politician when there's a big problem to solve. Let's call a designer also. No, let's bring a designer also on the table. What is your vision about it? You see yourself, your practice relevant, again, 20 years from now, in which form? What have you contributed? And I know, I can answer too, because I've seen some of your work already affecting a city, changing for good a city. So.
I'd go, in that direction. It's not even what we think or what we want. It's just happening. The digital era that started a couple of decades ago was one-dimensional. You had a list of results and direct links to things. And only recently has it become two-dimensional, where you search more on a map than on a list. And I think that this is going to evolve to encompass the whole digital realm, simply because of the sheer amount of information that is served. You cannot encompass that information on a list. You need a second dimension. In a list you see 10 answers. On a map you see 1,000 at a glance. And when you explore you see 10,000. So you go orders of magnitudes more to process all the information that is surrounding you and that is being multiplied every day. So I'm not saying we're going to third dimension. That's much more difficult to apprehend. But the digital platforms such as Google Maps, Apple Maps, Naver, and others have taught people to use that second dimension, to use maps every day, which was not the case. Most people did not use maps. They were afraid of them, or they did not know how to use them. And now most people are getting used to them. So now maps can be used not only for showing a real space, but for showing any amount of information with their relationships. So maps are going to expand to a realm much wider than what we know today. So talk about relevance.
Thank you. Ilya.
Yeah, I'm also thinking that a lot more services would be integrated into maps, a lot more things that you do in your life that you usually not think of something that's connected to mapping will be there. Like when digital maps started appearing, they were just digital versions of maps that we were used to before on paper. And then like transit started to appear, and then some other information, like businesses started to appear because they realized that we could add dynamic information. And now to see what time some grocery store stops working, I would go to the map. I would not even consider looking at their website. I don't know if they even have it. I will go to the map, I will find that grocery store, I would tap it, and I will see their schedule. And now when I look for a bus route in my city, and it shows me the route, I could order a taxi directly from my mapping application, even though taxi is a separate application, but they are integrated, and it suggests that it would cost this amount of money, and maybe I would prefer a taxi. At some point, I will be able, or maybe I am already able, I don't know, I haven't tried this, to tap a grocery store and order a delivery from there inside the map application, and who knows what else would be there. So I very much like the thing that you said about like moving from lists to two-dimensional things, because a lot of our lives happen in this two-dimensional world because we cannot fly. So everything can be eventually integrated into maps, and we'll have a lot of work to make sure it's all legible and it all makes sense, because there's so much of that stuff. So I think that in 20 years there will be nothing magical, even though we may be wearing some devices, but we will still have to solve the same problems with information density, with priorities of layering and everything. So we'll have some interesting work to do.
Thank you. Sergio.
I think when I think about maybe not 50 years, I won't be here either, but in 50 years' time, certainly in the future, I think about who owns the map, like who's actually going to be in control of it. And I think it's really interesting what you said, Jörg, about how people have become very proficient map users. But is that going to translate in the future to people becoming map creators? You know, you can imagine the tools are almost there already, where you can design your own maps, you can issue them, publish them, distribute them yourselves. Are people going to use this more and more as a medium for describing what they plan to do or what they've been doing, or is it going to become that kind of, you know, that kind of, not really art form, just a natural extension of conversation? Does that mean that people are going to take back ownership of that, or is it still going to be these huge, fairly faceless, you know, 1 or 2, 3, 4 in the world organizations that are controlling not just the look of the map, but the content of the map, which is so important. So that's what I wonder about.
Thank you. As usual, I just want to check if there are any questions for the panel. Oh, okay, you and then Zach.
I would like to focus on the user, because you know, you say that in maps a user will trust, but there are also non-users. They can't use them. I remember precisely that when I was asked to recreate the RETP map collection in '87, I've asked 2 years after a customer survey to verify if the budget spent was useful or not. So because I was in the marketing unit before, so I wanted to be sure. And I had been troubled by my boss, former boss, who had said, the map is finished. So he had said that. He was very convincing, and he was guessing what could happen, and he not guessing. He was saying what could happen. I was not agreeing him, but in some words, the smartphone has saved the map, because when it was only static, I was seeing that there was a decline. But the point I want to say is that through this customer survey, we have seen how the brain was working and why people couldn't use a map, especially a bus map. And it was linked to very medical dimensions, the degree of history, the degree of obsessionality. So I think that we could refresh these studies because it's, for me, 30 years old. And now, because there is no mutation of the brain, we have not doubled our brain because we are living at the same time in the physical world and the digital world. But something is changing. The generation change. So perhaps in the future Transit Mapping Symposiums, we could open the discussion to people like philosophers or doctors, psychologists, to be more sure about on which dimension of the human brain we could rely. Because, in fact, I'm not sure that we are not surfing, convincing ourselves. I trust in maps, but should I be sure? So, what is your opinion about that?
Our colleague Mark van Hagen from Netherlands Railways confirmed recently in his study that he shared with us that we are facing basically 3 types of users. To put it simple, we have so-called spatial navigators, people who understand space and are very comfortable with the map that represents that space. Basically 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, to put things simple. Then we have 1/3 of narrative navigators, people who do not have a sense of space and who like a sequence of events. Go straight, 300 meters at the bakery, turn right. A sequence which is the same as cooking. Take an egg, break it, fry it, etc. And then we have the last category, which is the one we less care about, let's say. Nobody takes it into consideration up front, is the people who have no sense of space and cannot follow a sequence. So it's old people with dementia, very young children, a very anxious tourist who is in an environment that is overwhelming him and cannot think anymore. So that category we're not really taking much into consideration. And what happened with those digital tools that we have is that they have blurred those categories. That somebody who's in one category with the digital tools can be in another one. That I see as a big novelty in that who is the user. We know even less now who is our user and what he feels at any given time with one tool or with another tool. So I absolutely agree with you that that discussion should be open. Who are the users? How do they function? Are we really addressing their needs or not? We know we are addressing a part of the needs, but is there a whole realm that remains hidden from us?
You want to add on that, or?
The only thing I can really think of is that we don't ask ourselves that question enough, who we're serving and how successful we're doing it. I've often found that on the operator side, customer information is just, if it's even given like an individual tick box in a survey, is not drilled down any deeper than that. So it's just basic stuff. Was there information? Did it help you? Yes, no, but never exploring why not. So yeah, the more we ask those kind of questions, the better the end product will be at the end of the day.
You want to add anything? Or
I'm not sure how relevant this is, but I just remembered that very recently I started to go to a particular place in my city by driving. And before, I wasn't used to using navigation in my car because I knew all the roads which I ever needed to use. But in this particular case, I know the roads. There are several roads, but depending on the traffic situation, it may take 20 minutes or it may take 40 minutes depending on which road you take. So I had to build it into my routine to check with the navigator to pick the right road. And what I was thinking is that I don't want to see the map because I know the city. I don't want to see any of that. I don't want to even touch my phone. I don't want to plug it into my car, nothing. I just want something to tell me a couple of street names which will describe the whole route to me, because I know all those streets. Just tell me, take street A and then street D. Or next morning it says, today take street C and then take that bridge. And that will be enough. And nothing gives me that information. So I had to look at the map. I have to understand what are all those lines on the map. And most of those turns are all the same every morning. So I have to zoom in to check like particular 2 or 3 streets that I need to choose from. So I think when AI gets better, I guess in a couple of months, maybe it will just know that's the question that I have in my head. It should look at the map. I don't want to look at the map. I've seen enough maps. Just tell me which 2 streets are relevant. So maybe this is something that will be useful to so many people. Because again, not many people want to look at the map, but they still need some direction. And for some people, it's an order of things or turns or whatever. And maybe at some point we will be building tools like this that will be helping us in this way, I don't know, and that will be useful to another category of users who cannot use maps today. I don't know.
Thank you. While the mic goes to Zach, I just want to reassure you about one thing, and it's the contribution of philosophers to the debate. Few months from now, the Cognitive Life of Maps by Roberto Casati, the philosopher I've been lucky enough to work with some 20 years now, will be out for MIT Press. It's going to be extremely relevant. It's going to be a sensational book, and it's everything about really cognition and maps. It's going to be there, detail, eventually, with a level of attention and detail and scholarship that we haven't had yet in our field. So that's the book I strongly recommend everybody to wait for. Cognitive Life of Maps by Roberto Casati and Institut Unicode with MIT Press. It's not giving me percentages, but he's a great friend. Zach.
North up or heads up?
Sorry?
North up or heads up?
What do you mean?
Maps.
Flat.
Ah, okay. Sorry.
Yes.
The only solution is flat. You put it flat, just as the ground, and then it's obvious that it's showing the right directions. Otherwise, it's a matter of religion. I like north up or heads up, but testing shows that you cannot confirm it. Some people consider that what is in front of us is down. Some consider it's up. So since you are trying to address millions, you will never be right. There's no right answer to that question. It's just the same for past and present. Yeah. We tend to say, oh, the past is behind us and the present is in front. And you have many other places on Earth, in Buryatia, in Madagascar, where they consider that the past is in front. That's what is coming. The past is in front. That's what you see. You know what it is. You've seen it. It's there. And the future, it's what you don't see. You have no idea what will happen. So it's exactly reverse.
Well, if I may, I would question this as a methodology, because if there's just 2 cultures outside the world, it could be like the outliers not demonstrating a rule. And my point about the maps is that I would say that there are aspects that are quasi-religious, so okay, we don't go there, that's the way I love it, whatever. But there are aspects that are actually quite true. So if it's a north-oriented map, please don't put it on a on a wall that is not south-facing. Otherwise, it gives me a mirror image of the reality. Or if that map doesn't point north, just don't make me think that it does. Indicate it. I have for example, personally, I'm all for experimenting all kind of formats, depending on the context. Just the things that as a user, I have this stance. I trust this map. So if a distance is presented in a certain way, I do put things together. I work through analogies. Yeah, we all work through the analogies. So if that length, and I feel it's accurate, then, oh, no, it's not. Oh, so it's a diagram. Make sure that my ape brain understand it's a diagram and not a representation, an actual, so scale. Scale is fundamental. So.
I agree with the scale. It's on small scale, like Legible London, the neighborhood. Well, there we can discuss, should it be turned or not? On a large scale, if you rotate all of London, you're in trouble.
Yeah. Yep. If we have time, I could end with one question, very, very selfish. Actually, not selfish just for me, but also for my students, okay? Give them one thing that you think that I probably not mentioning in the book, in the class, and you don't know, maybe I will surprise it, but that they really should know about wayfinding. A topic, a map, a character, an author. Don't say, yo, Kaminagai, I will take care of that, don't worry, but anything else. Sergio, something that they really should know.
Elia first, and then I'll...
Elia first.
Wait, what? You want me to name a book or what?
A book, an author, a place, or something that is relevant in wayfinding, that it was relevant maybe for you, and it's maybe not in the canon, so it's not the classic, oh, Harry Beck.
Well, I don't know what you're teaching. Maybe
that's exactly my point.
Yeah, well, maybe what I say is like everyone knows already.
Well, let's see.
Yeah, okay. Well, usually when I see the maps, most people don't care about how you make the curves of the lines. They make them from pieces of a circle. They make radial roundings, and they look ugly as hell. Never use these roundings that are based on radius. You have to, well, if you use Figma, you can automatically do these beautiful roundings that are based on how things bend in real life. But in Illustrator, you have to spend some time with Bezier curves. Yeah, because it's one of those things where if you see it once and you see the difference, you can't unsee it. And on every single map, no matter how beautiful it is, your eye is like, yeah, but why are those turns so ugly? Why couldn't they just make the turns beautiful? So if you are not doing that yet, start doing it. That would be my very small advice,
so much.
which is very important to me.
I don't know if this is controversial or not, but it's more and more my opinion. No legends, no keys, ever.
Agreed.
But you have the right to another one.
Go to Venice. If you want to learn what wayfinding is, you go to Venice. You have small streets winding around the city. You have canals. It's all interconnected but separate. And you have different scale. Go there and see if you can manage to find your way through the city on different modes. Then you will learn the complexity of wayfinding.
Okay, so we are on time. I would just ask, because there is also some other panelists in the audience, if you want to contribute this for my students. Yeah, Samuel. We're keeping Richard healthy and in good shape.
No, I wanted to actually add on to what you said just now about designers. I'm not sure if this is what you're trying to get to, but the relevance of designers. Actually, after LTA, I joined an innovation lab in the Public Service Division in Singapore. So we have a group of designers actually influencing policy design, and we help public officers understand their problem better using design sensibilities. So there is room for designers in policy making and influencing, like what Yogesh mentioned, influencing from the top. So there's hope. Yeah, and also I wanted to tie back to just now we were talking about in Maps We Trust. So back in Singapore also, we actually had the chance to shadow 30 elderlies because we have that active mobility unit. So they gathered 30 elderlies of different types. So for example, some of them could be living alone, some of them have mobility issues. So we have them like on a task and we get them to navigate the system as is, and then we shadow them literally with no help, and I just observe what they did. So I could literally ask the lady, like, why did you stand there for so long? Why did you wait? Or what were you trying to find? Because the answer was right in front of us. For me, it was very obvious. So then she said, oh, she was actually looking for a particular sign of a particular color. So she trusted the system in one way, but the system failed her by creating a lot of different variations. So I feel like for us, we have to be very sensitive about how difficult your system is to learn. So this was a huge takeaway for me, which is why if you notice the new science system that we designed for Singapore, is kind of like dumbed down because we wanted to make the system easy to learn. And while doing that, I actually realized that what makes a system easy to learn is that you have to help the user ask questions. So by displaying answers and making them expect answers actually kind of make people not so smart and not so in tune with using wayfinding solutions. So the previous system that we had, right, kind of, because you asked for a certain building, we added the building on the sign. And then when the building is not there, the sign was a mistake. So that became like a, whoa, we have 10 different landmarks on a directional sign, and people started to expect more and more, and you have people just standing in the middle of a crowded walkway to wait for answers. So what we needed to do was reduce answers and have them like, oh, if there's no answers here, there should be somewhere else, and we wanted them to redirect to find answers for yourself. So that was the motivation behind the design. So I guess what I wanted to share with especially your students would be, your system should help people learn the system. It shouldn't just be how pretty or how nice it is at a particular spot. All of them should actually make people think about, oh, so this is what you're trying to convey, and this is how I'm going to navigate. Yeah, hope
Thank you. Thank you so much. So on this note, I'll leave the mic to Richard to maybe announce the...
Well, so that's it. Thank you very much for the panel.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Okay, well, so thank you very much. That was the morning. We are, for the people watching on the stream, and there are some of you, thank you very much. We are going to take about a 2-hour break. I did put another scheduled stream on the YouTube channel, so you can watch out for that. It's scheduled, but it might start a little bit before, a little bit after the time that it was scheduled. We'll see. So we will see you later. And for the rest of you who are here and not on the stream, we are going to go have lunch. But before that, we are going to take a picture on the stairs over there. Feel free to not participate if you don't want to, but we'd like to have a group picture of the people here. And then we'll have lunch, and we'll come back at, what time did I say? Yeah, exact time. So we're going to come back for after lunch at 2:40. Yes, 2:40 sharp, right after lunch. But we're not breaking for 2 hours. Only the stream is breaking for 2 hours. That's what I mean. So 2:40, be here or be square.